timers, alarms, reminders, time-blocked calendars, notifications, lockboxes or drawers for your phone, minimalist design, soundproof headphones or earbuds with productive instrumental music blaring, planners, planning systems, YouTube gurus, vitamins, exercise, cold showers. None of these things are bad. And in fact, a lot of them are really helpful. But they don't get to the real issue, do they? Chances are, if you're frustrated with not achieving the things that you want to in your life, you've tried some of these things. Maybe you've even seen them as the possible saviors for your problem of not being able to reach the goals that you set for yourself. And then when that new thing that you're trying fails, that productivity system that you've built specifically for yourself doesn't measure up to your standards, what do you think? Well, I guess that didn't work for me. And here we get to the heart of the issue, because there are two ways that you can say that didn't work for me. One is in a very non-judgmental tone. It's where you're saying oh yeah, I know that method works for some people, but it didn't work for me, and that's okay. But that's not always how we say it, is it? It's not even most of the time. A lot of times when we say something didn't work for us, there's this underlying feeling of guilt and judgment on ourselves about the fact that it didn't work for us. A lot of times we see our failure to keep a system that we have contrived and just built specifically to make us better people and more productive as a personal failing, as a flaw. And then it just becomes fuel for this negative self-talk, these ways that we say to ourselves that we're lazy or we're not organized or we'll never be able to reach our dreams and our goals or the ambitions that we have in our hearts. That's not a fun place to be. And most of us, after grappling with that for a time, end up right back at the drawing board. We have a blank slate and we're ready to build a new system using new tools or maybe variations on the tools, or just trying harder at the things that we've already tried to do. We try to eliminate distractions and increase our focus on the things that we really want to be achieving. But we rarely, if ever, look inside ourselves. Today, let's change that. Here's how therapist and author Dr. Anita Phillips puts it. External motivators will only take us so far if our emotional well-being can't support the things we hope to grow. Instead of setting up external things to help you force your way to your goals, do a soil check. Ask yourself, what's going on inside me that's making this goal hard to reach? So in that book that I just quoted, she's using a garden as a metaphor for ourselves. But it works really well if you ignore that metaphor and just focus on what she's actually saying in that quote. Ask yourself, what's going on inside me that's making this goal hard to reach? Now, please hear me. I am not saying that the reason you aren't reaching your goals is due to something inside of you. In fact, I'm saying the opposite. I just think that most of the time when we are talking about goals and habits and a lot of the things that I talk about here on this channel, we are talking about how we can change forces outside of ourselves in order to achieve the things that we want to achieve. And that leaves a really integral piece, namely ourselves, out of that conversation. So today is my first attempt to try to fix that. So for the rest of this video, I'm going to talk about ways that you can really focus on your goals without limiting or restricting yourself. Ways that don't make you rely on those external motivators to achieve your goals, but actually help you turn inward as well and reflect. Because yes, I have tried doing the purely external route, and honestly, it does work sometimes, but it doesn't always work, and it doesn't always work forever. Now, I wouldn't say that I'm perfect at this, but I really prefer to find and practice methods that don't require me to rely solely on my own self-discipline, because I know myself well enough to know that varies from time to time. There are days that I am very self-disciplined, and then there are times when I do not have the mental or emotional energy to be disciplined about all the things that I want to in my life. And so if I have better internal structures to support that so that my self-discipline and self-control doesn't have to carry the entire load, I'm going to be a happier and healthier person, and I'm also probably going to achieve more of the things that I set out to accomplish, because I'm not relying on just one characteristic to get it all done. That'd be like if I only ever trained my left arm and then I expected to be able to lift heavy things. Like, yes, I will be able to lift a lot of heavy things, but once you get above a certain size, the things that one hand can't grip, I would be totally lost because the rest of my body would be weak. I feel like that's sort of the relationship that a lot of us have with self-discipline and, self-control and productivity is we expect that self-discipline, our left arm, to just do all of the work when actually we need to be supporting it with our whole selves. So let's get to that. Sometimes we make goals because we think that they're a good thing to do based on some sort of idealized life that exists in our heads. And also based on the fact that we see how far we are from measuring up to how we think we're supposed to be. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to improve ourselves, make ourselves better people, make ourselves healthier, happier, whatever the thing is that you're trying to work toward. But when you make a goal starting with the assumption that you currently are trash, you are setting yourself up for so much discontentment and unhappiness. And honestly, this is not a super effective way to reach your goals. So if you are trying to achieve something, you really need to be tapped into why you think that this is a good thing to achieve. Because a lot of times, and this sounds silly, and it's not, I promise it's not, because we are wired to, be social animals. We want to fit in. But a lot of times we have this picture in our minds, maybe things people have said to us or not said to us, we've just sort of inferred them. And so we think we have to behave or act a certain way in order to be successful or in order to be good. So when you come across a goal like this, you're probably going to realize either one of two things. First, you may think that you want to do this thing or achieve this goal at first, but when you dig down a little bit deeper, you actually find that somebody else chose that for you. At some point, either, society's unwritten expectations or someone specifically chose that goal for you, maybe someone you admire. Or second of all, you are just trying to do the good thing, the safe thing, the thing that you think you're supposed to do. And so that's why it's a goal for you. But you don't really feel a lot of personal stake in it when you sort of get right down to it. So if you have made a goal because you feel like you need to measure up, because you're worried what people will think if you don't reach that goal, because you think that you desperately need improving, that's not a healthy way to reach that goal. And it's also not the way to make yourself happier with the circumstance that you're in. Even if you do manage to punish yourself over the finish line, you will not be happy when you get there. You will not feel like you accomplished something because your head will be filled with the unkind messages and prodding that you have had to do to get yourself to the place where you are now. If your goal is losing weight, your mind will still be filled with messages about how fat and lazy you are. And those are just not things that you need to hear. It's much better to set a goal from a place of self-acceptance, knowing who you are, what's actually important to you, and setting realistic goals that you are excited to reach and that are not such a far stretch for you that you won't be able to reach them. So getting emotionally and mentally healthy feels kind of obvious, but I still think that it is worth noting. To rephrase what Dr. Phillips said earlier, you can put as many external supports for your habits or your goals that you want to in place in your life. But if you don't have the solid foundation inside of you to support those things, they're going to crumble. It's great to think about your environment and how you can make it easier to do the things that you want to do and harder to do the things that you don't want to do. But at the end of the day, if you are doing all of that and ignoring what's going on inside of you, your efforts will not be as successful. For example, one habit that I am trying to do less of is that I like to eat sugar, a lot of sugar. I'm not saying that sugar is bad. I'm just saying that I eat more of it than I should for my physical well-being and feeling good in my head and in my stomach and things like that. So I have some external things in place, right? I don't buy a lot of candy. I don't buy a lot of ice cream. I have, all my sweet baking supplies are up on a top high shelf in my kitchen. But if I'm only maintaining those external supports to discourage me from eating sweets and I'm not doing the internal work of attending to my stress and anxiety, it really doesn't matter, right? Like, because I like to stress eat sugar as well. When I am stressed or anxious, I turn to my comfort foods, I turn to sugar. And so I've had times in my life where I am really stressed and, maybe I'm doing the internal work, maybe I'm not. And I'll have nothing in the house that's like ready to eat with sugar. And I'm too stressed to do anything else, but I will eat like a cup, like a measuring cup full of chocolate chips, from my baking supplies. Or I will get the sugar out of the cupboard and I will make like a caramel sauce with milk, or like I'll get sugar and cocoa and I'll make like a hot cocoa that I can drink. Or I will make like a midnight run to Culver's or to the grocery store to get a pint of ice cream. Like, there are ways. When your internal support is not there, there are lots of ways that my brain knows how to get what it wants when I am not attending to my emotional, physical, mental well-being. And so if you are not attending to those things, it's going to make it a lot harder to achieve your goals. I do therapy as part of my mental and emotional well-being, and that's a great option. If that is for some reason not in the cards for you, there are books, there are resources on this channel. I'll link to one in the cards. Just do what you can to attend to that as well, because that's going to make a big difference for what you're able to achieve. Okay, here is the truth about goals. They are all hard to achieve because if they weren't, they wouldn't be goals. We would just do them naturally. But some goals are harder than others. And I'm sure that you can probably think about one goal in your life right now that seems like unnecessarily hard, like harder than it needs to be, and you are just struggling with it. I'm sure that there may be some emotions coming up for you right now as you think about that goal, maybe guilt, maybe shame, maybe anger, maybe sadness. As you are experiencing those emotions, go ahead and also ask yourself, why? Why do you think that this goal is harder for you than it needs to be? Maybe it's because you have unrealistic expectations for yourself. Maybe it's because the system around you is sort of set up for you to fail. Maybe it's because you failed at this thing before and you are carrying a load of guilt associated with it and you don't even really want to think about starting it back up. Maybe it's something like we talked about earlier in this video and it's not coming from a place of self-acceptance, and so you just feel awful. Every time you think about it, you're like, I feel bad about doing that. I feel bad about where I am now, and it just seems like a no-win situation. When you are able to dissect your relationship with your goal and really figure out why it's not working for you, you empower yourself to make changes that you need to make in order to change that relationship with your goal and make it a positive one. I'm actually really excited about this one because it is so good. Because a lot of times the way that we approach goals, we have a lot of ideas in our head about like how they're supposed to work, how we're supposed to do it, all of these things. And that's just kind of how our brains work. There's nothing wrong with that. But it is a little bit unfortunate because sometimes the assumptions that we have before we go into a goal sink us before we even begin. So if you are struggling to form a good habit or reach a goal that you set for yourself, think about the assumptions that you have about how you're supposed to get that thing done, how you're supposed to reach that goal or perform the habit. Ask yourself, like, what are these assumptions? What are these rules that I'm trying to live by? And how can I change them to make this work better for me? This is something I've had to learn in a lot of areas in my life. I think probably the one that comes first to mind is my professional life. So I am a freelance writer by profession, and especially when I was first starting out, I sort of had this idea in my mind that because writing takes a while, it takes a while to like get into the flow of things and really be able to focus on your assignment, that if I had like 10 minutes or 15 minutes to work on a work project, that wasn't enough. So like, for example, if I had, an appointment or I knew I was going to eat lunch in 15 minutes, I wouldn't sit down and work on my writing project at all because I figured it wasn't even worth it. It was a waste of time. I'd go do something else. And while in some cases, I may have a 10 or 15 minute thing that I also need to get done. And so that's a great opportunity to get that done. What I've learned over time and with practice is that even if I don't get much done, making that progress still counts. It still adds up over time. And so the assumption that I had was 10 minutes is not enough. But what I've been able to realize as I've sort of changed the rules for how I work is that Making some progress on a project is better than making no progress. And I feel like that is the sort of takeaway that often comes from re-examining the rules. Let's dive into this one a little bit deeper before we move on, just because I feel like this is the hardest one to do on our own, because these assumptions are there for a reason and they're sort of hidden in our brains. So I'm going to give you some questions that you can use to sort of work through these a little bit. And then I'll have some examples too, just to make it a little bit easier to put into practice. The first question is, when I think I'm doing a bad job, what exactly makes me think that? For example, I'm doing a bad job at exercising because I didn't exercise for at least 30 minutes. Number 2, if I don't make progress on this, what are the reasons I tell myself about why? For example, I don't feel like going to the gym today, or I just washed my hair and I don't want to get all sweaty. 3, how does my identity relate to this thing? For example, I tell my friends all the time that I hate exercise unless it involves a game. Or I'm the kind of person who would much rather spend Saturday morning sleeping in than out for a run. And 4, if I perfectly executed this every time, what would that look like? For example, I'd get up at 6 a.m. to go to the gym every morning and run for an hour. In these examples, I picked exercise because I feel like that's something that many of us can relate to. But it really could be anything in our lives. We have a ton of unknown, unvocalized assumptions running through our head at every moment about basically every task that we do throughout the day. At some point in my life, I have told myself all of those things that I said in the example about exercise. But as I've examined these assumptions over time and sort of rewritten the rules of exercise in my life, what I've realized is that the only assumption that's really helpful for me to hold on to when it comes to forming an exercise habit is that some movement is better than no movement. When I've dropped those assumptions, I've been able to make better progress toward different goals in my life. And yes, I know that you're probably, if you're like an exercise person, you're probably going to come at me and be like, cardio is so important, sweat is so important. And I agree. But if I'm having a day where what I'm telling myself is, oh, I have to get sweaty and I don't want to, it's better for me to do something like yoga or strength training that is not going to make me sweaty than for me to do nothing at all and to feel lazy and down about myself. Because when I'm able to find joy in the progress that I'm making, it births more progress. It births more commitment to the habit, to the goal, and it builds over time in a very gentle and sustainable way. Another way that you should be able to identify the things that are tripping you up along the way as you set out to achieve a goal is to pay attention to what is going on in your body. Your mind, your body, your emotions, these are all full of clues to how you perceive something in a given moment. It's quite possible that something you are doing in the process of achieving your goal is triggering something for you. Maybe it is very stressful for you. Maybe it's triggering anxiety or imposter syndrome. Maybe there's some trauma that you haven't been able to deal with yet, and that's coming up. Whatever it is that is making it difficult for you to accomplish things that is inside of you, the signs are there. You just have to be able to notice them and process them in like a healthy way. This process can be really scary. I've been working on this for I think over a year now in therapy, and there are still days I don't want to do it. And there are also days where like I just push it out of my mind and I forget that it even exists. But these things that your body is giving you, they're gifts. The stress, the anxiety, the sadness, the weariness, whatever it is that you're feeling, it may not feel like a gift, but it is your body's way of telling you what is going on inside of you. And when your body does give you those gifts, it's a good idea to notice them, make sure that you don't push them down or say that they don't matter, and then use that as a prompt to sort of see like, is there a way that I could make this gentler or easier on myself based on how I'm feeling now? For me in my writing process, a lot of times what's holding me up is that like I over edit and I really try to get it as perfect as possible, before I turn it in. And while that may be good on the one hand for delivering a perfect product, sometimes I spend a lot of my own time making it just like 2% better when it was already 98% of the way there and nobody else was even going to know. So really think about and honor the emotions that you are feeling as part of that process. See what sort of things you can do to make it as gentle on yourself as possible. And then once you have done all of that, we can start having a conversation about like how you make things easier for yourself or harder for yourself. But I think that this right here is really the foundation of good habits, of achieving everything you want in your life and being able to focus on it. It's making sure that your goals are coming from the right place, that you are mentally and emotionally healthy, that you're paying attention to what's going on inside of you, that you're able to examine your relationship with your goals, and you're able to question your own beliefs and assumptions about the task and rewrite the rules when you need to. So I hope that this video was helpful. If you enjoyed this video, I think that you would really enjoy my video on contentment, and I will link to it here or here somewhere around my head. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.